Well, Malaysia is a close neighbor and a partner of the Philippines in ASEAN. And as ambassador here, I have seen some very significant milestones in bilateral relations. If you recall, President Aquino visited Malaysia on a state visit in February last year. And before that, before that, Prime Minister Najib was in the Philippines to attend the signing ceremony of the Framework Agreement on the Bangsamoro, FAB. And a month after the President visited Malaysia in February last year, Prime Minister Najib visited the Philippines for the second time, and that was in March. And that was for the signing of the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. As ambassador, you live to see these exchanges of visits, to this helping each other out, mutual problem solving. And to me, that was an indication that we have been able to have good rapport, effective coordination, and a working partnership between our two countries. When the President was here last year, he visited a Petron gasoline station and presided over a inauguration. Okay, and you know, people here as well as in the Philippines were excited because that was one big significant investment by a Philippine company in recent memory. Petron, since they entered into the Malaysian market, has been operating almost 557 gasoline stations and one huge oil refinery. So this is Philippine investment money going into Malaysia, helping out to create jobs and opportunities here. And it is a source of pride for us, and obviously for the President because he attended the opening of that gasoline station, in having Petron operate in Malaysia and to become a global, at least a regional player. So I was very happy that the President had that event. To me, the investment of Petron was a bellwether, okay? Because it has been, you know, for quite some time that there has not been a big Philippine investment here. But, okay, just a few days ago, in fact, I was very excited to read in the papers that another big Philippine player has entered the Malaysian market, and this is Ayala Land. And as this Reuters news story mentioned, Ayala invested 1.9 billion pesos or $42.88 million US in a Malaysian property company. This is the GW Holdings Berhad. And what made me excited about this is Ayala was once a big player here, way back in the 70s, when Kuala Lumpur and many other places here in Malaysia wasn't that developed yet. Okay, but following the slowdown in the Philippine economy, the Ayala Group withdrew, probably not only from Malaysia but from other Southeast Asian countries. But this year they're back So as an ambassador, I see this as like we're coming in full circles. And that is also indicative of the continued robust growth of the Philippine economy. And we have here, in fact, a listing of the Philippine companies operating in Malaysia. So we have Petron, we have PLDT Malaysia operating as Smart Malaysia. Then we have Rubina group of companies. They're selling their Jack and Jill snacks here. And Ramcar batteries, and of course LBC Malaysia, the cargo carrier. And last but not least, we have Cebu Pacific, and we're glad to have Cebu Pacific here. Let's just talk about the Filipinos on this side, which we call as the Peninsular Malaysia side. We estimate the number of Filipinos here to be around 110,000. And they are in the IT, engineering, some are in education, a lot are in the oil and gas sectors of the Malaysian economy, as well as, of course, and a big portion of them are in the household services sector. To us, it's very important that we do proactive work in enhancing bilateral relations. And by the exchange of visits that we have had with Malaysia, it is underscoring the vibrancy of this bilateral partnership. Also, we have been able, I think, to have breakthroughs in a number of sectors. During the visit of President Aquino last year, 2 bilateral agreements were signed. One was on cooperation in education, as well as cooperation in culture and historical conservation. Okay, and the first one, to us, the cooperation on education is very significant because it has allowed us a platform by which we can pursue our alternative education for Filipino children in Sabah who, because of the undocumented status of their parents and of themselves, have no access to local schools. They can't enroll in local schools. And to me, as an ambassador, that is a big concern. So we made it a priority to work on this area by pursuing this unique initiative of undertaking alternative education for the children, and also by engaging the local authorities in this particular field of education. And how do we do this? How have we done it? What we have done was to talk to our community leaders in Sabah and ask them to work with us so that they, with our support, can establish alternative learning centers. And these alternative learning centers now number about 7, and have been able to take in some 2,100 Filipino children who otherwise would not be getting any education. So that for me is very significant. Another area, in fact, that we are so excited about is the growth in people-to-people exchange between Malaysians and Filipinos. And one innovative project that we have done and will do again for the second time next month is the conduct of what we call as the Ambassador's Tour of the Philippines. We did it a year and a half ago. We brought 112 Malaysians to Manila and toured them around Tagaytay, Villa Escudero, Intramuros, and all of those places. In May 2025, I will be escorting and bringing to Cebu and Bohol 120 Malaysian tourists. And they're very excited to go to Cebu and to Bohol. This is our efforts in trying to create excitement for the Visit Philippines 2015 year. And also, we're very happy to witness, in fact, a dramatic growth in the Malaysian tourist arrivals to the Philippines. Last year, the percentage growth of Malaysian tourists visiting the Philippines was 27% year on year. And it is the highest among the Philippine major markets. So it beat Korea, it beat the US in terms of growth rate. And we're very, very excited about that. We thought that there was a need to go over the agreements that have been signed with Malaysia. And through the years, starting the time that we entered into bilateral relations with this country, and we counted about 20. So that includes formal agreements, protocols to these agreements, and declaration. Why is this important? It is because, you know, when you enter into an agreement, it reflects the desire of two parties, okay, to select an area where they could cooperate, okay. Maybe because there's a problem that they have seen, or maybe they see an opportunity to harness, okay. So what could be an opportunity to harness? Culture, education, tourism. In fact, we have agreements there. What could be areas where we're trying to address some problems? Maybe an agreement on defense cooperation, on police cooperation, on against transnational crimes. So in fact, there are already certain agreed approaches to addressing this. Many, in fact, have already been signed. But after having been signed, some people, you know, just tend to forget that there had been those agreements already that had been concluded. So it perplexes the mind at times that for anyone who is not conscious that there was already a signed agreement when meeting a similar issue would think that they would have to start from scratch. So that was the reasoning behind it. In as much as these are already agreed arrangements, maybe it ought to be used, it ought to be implemented to the fullest. Now, if it does not cater to current realities, then having this compilation is also a prompt to have a review and maybe a renegotiation of these agreements. And also by having it very handy, okay, maybe it may point to, may point out by their omission the agreements that ought to be considered as well. So I think it is very important that compilations like this ought to be done, because in the first place, what good an agreement would be if it is only known by the signatories and not by the entire public. See, by making these agreements more widely available and disseminated to, let us say, on education, give it to DepEd, give it to CHED, give it to TESDA. Maybe some of them can pick out certain things so that there could be some synergy that could be created, so that the two sides, when it gets to meet, can have a more enhanced relations. This year is an exciting year for the peoples of ASEAN, because this has been the year chosen for the launching of the ASEAN community. This year's summit will focus on a number of things, including the unveiling of a post-2015 vision, further support to micro, small, and medium-scale industries, promoting regional peace and security, and by and large, strengthening and enhancing the capability, the capacity of our association to be a global player. All of these are very, very important. Now, how does it benefit the people in the barangays, or in the kampongs, as they would call it in Malaysia, or in Cambodia, or in Indonesia? Well, the thrust at this summit is, in fact, the economic side, to further realize the creation within ASEAN and of the ASEAN as a common market and production base. Okay? So by having a common market and by the lowering of the tariffs, and thus enabling a freer movement of goods and services includes people, we can be able to create efficiencies in that economic system, and this should lead to jobs, more jobs, and economic opportunities for the peoples in the region, including the Philippines. So, at the end of the day, the ASEAN community is about creating jobs and also fostering the habit of cooperation, okay, among governments, and also strengthening friendships. So in ASEAN, we do not only strengthen the people-to-people engagement of two member countries like Philippines and Malaysia, as I've discussed before, but between and among 10 member states. Well, I think it has done a lot already. It has achieved a lot. ASEAN is nearing its 50 years of existence. And some people are saying, why is it not fast enough? But one should always be conscious that this project, just like any other, it's a work in progress. Okay, the joy, in fact, is in the journey. As long as we're together, headed to a certain desired objective, we're okay. And for quite some time, the peace and security that ASEAN has fostered has enabled the robust economic growth to take place within our region. So we're getting there. In fact, at this summit here in KL, in Langkawi, and again at the end of the year for the second summit, there's a lot to celebrate. And to top it, there would also be the unveiling of the ASEAN post-2015 vision, which is, of course, very crucial for the future direction of our association. I think the President has made pronouncements on what we would like to see in this post-2015 vision. But I think what is important is the need not only for sustained growth, but for inclusive growth. And the President has cited the good example of what we have been able to do in the Philippines through the DSWD. And this is the Pantawid program. And I think that also represents a best practice which the other ASEAN countries probably should look out and consider for their own people. But what we anticipate is that there would be a declaration on the global movement of moderates, and also a declaration on people-centered ASEAN. In my view, if I may add, it's important that this concept of moderation be pursued. This is an initiative, incidentally, of our host, Malaysia. And exploring this, pursuing this, could be an antidote to the religious extremism that we're seeing. There have been a number of apprehensions undertaken here in this country with respect to certain national of theirs who have had involvements with the IS militant group. And I think this issue has been extensively discussed among them, and what is indeed needed is to dampen the attractiveness of this militant religious approach. And how does one do it effectively? It would be to bring out the value of moderation. So that is, I think, something which is important to our region. And with respect to the other declaration on an ASEAN which is people-centered, this country had adopted that theme too, of a people-centered ASEAN. That by itself is important, but the challenge, as the President had pointed out, is not merely to have it as a people-centered ASEAN, but as a people-driven ASEAN. Because what good it would it do if ASEAN is merely given direction by governments at the very top, who may not be reflective, and their moves may not be reflective of the sentiments, the wishes, the aspirations of those in the barangays or in the kampungs. So, better still, do grassroots consultations, engage the civil society and all the other players often in the margin, and let their aspiration drive the process. And in fact, when you do that, you get to have what you call as an inclusive decision making, bottom up rather than top down. Civil society, as I've said, how to make it an organization which is people driven rather than merely people centered. With respect to the youth, well, we need to involve the youth, because whether we like it or not, this will be their ASEAN come 10, 20, 30 years from now. I guess all of our strivings are meant to, we're doing all of this so that we can secure the future and fortune of the people after us, our youth. And with respect to businesses, I think we need to give further support to micro, small and medium industries. The big players in the 10 ASEAN countries are already doing their interaction. In fact, they can pretty well take care of themselves. The people who need the greater support would be those in the middle as well as in the lower. And why does it make sense? Because the jobs generated in the SME level is in fact huge. If you put them all together, it would dwarf the jobs created by and among the big companies. I think it's also very, very important because in the first place, our parliamentarians, our Congress representatives, they are the elected representatives of the people within their constituencies. So they should be reflecting the grassroots aspirations and thinking. So by engaging them, these representatives, you ought to be ideally getting the sentiments and aspirations of the people at the lower level. But there's another important value to having them here and being part of the ASEAN summit processes. And whatever, and in my view, it is this: whatever the presidents and prime ministers would agree upon, more often than not, the implementation would be requiring enactment of laws or congressional or parliamentary allocation of funds. So, who do you turn to for that? You turn to for that to the Congress people and to the parliamentarians. So instead of just agreeing at certain levels here and just telling them, okay, please pass this because we made those commitments, it would be best if they were already part of the decision-making process. So it would lead to seamless implementation. All of these issues or threats, if you would call them, are in fact faced very seriously by all the members states of ASEAN, and also by them as individual states, and that would include Malaysia. Internally, Malaysia is addressing the threats posed by the IAS, because there had been certain of their nationals who have in fact gone to the Middle East to fight on the side of the IS. So that is a significant development which they have given seriousness in time and in resources, and I think they're achieving success in this, and as well as with respect to also with respect to their concern with respect to the developments, the dramatic developments in the South China Sea. I think the statement by Foreign Minister Anifa right after the ASEAN ministerial meeting in Kota Kinabalu was quite significant, and he called for the early conclusion of the Code of Conduct on the South China Sea, and that was a statement appreciated by many people. Our community members here are doing quite well, okay, and our embassy team is also doing okay with respect to its mandate. We would like to think that we have proactively been doing our job. Incidentally, that is a favorite phrase also of Secretary Del Rosario, to do one's work proactively and reach beyond one's grasp. Given having been the ambassador here for the last 3.5 years, I think in addition to enhancing bilateral relations, it is also important that we build up the Filipino community here in Malaysia. And what is so the theme here is, let us continue to build the community. So when we undertake that alternative education initiative in Sabah, it is in fact building the Filipino community. When we hold our Independence Day commemoration here, and which we will be doing in 2 months' time in June, we are in fact building the community. And this I say almost with pride, because our community here have been able to not only have a community gathering come June 12, but also conduct a Philippine Independence Day commemoration parade. The last time we did it last year, our community members, some 2,500 of them, joined us in a parade that brought us from this embassy location to Bukit Bintang, which is the #1 shopping district of Malaysia, the equivalent of Ayala Avenue. So, 2,500 Filipinos and Filipinas in their Sunday's best doing a parade, okay? And being proud to be Filipinos. When we do that, in fact, we're building our community. And what does it take to build the community? I think it requires unity, solidarity, teamwork. Nothing more, nothing less.